Shut the door a bit. Behave yourself off there.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Saturday webinar. We're really happy you could join us today. I know it's going to be nice weather and you can get outside maybe in the afternoon and do some yard work. I think we're all looking forward to that. Today's guest speaker is going to be showing us some beautiful photography and information on spring ephemerals. So I'm so happy you could join us. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A box and we'll answer them at the end of his presentation. Today, I'd like to introduce the Executive Committee for MMGA. We have Vicki Lauren, who's our secretary, Norm Shear, who's our president, Ruth Dale Walker, who's co-interim treasurer, myself, I'm vice president and co-interim treasurer. And I'd like to introduce my friend Jenny Wanty. Jenny served as the MSU Master Naturalist Coordinator and worked in the Kent County MSU Horticultural Department for 13 years. She also serves on the West Michigan Conservation Network Board and works closely with the Kent and Montcalm Conservation Districts. Jenny's going to be introducing Craig for us today. Jenny, take it away.
Thank you, Sue. Before I share Craig's bio, I just want to alert you to his wonderful website, which you'll see on a slide shortly, but it's cdenature.com. The website has wonderful resources, including flower identifications, videos created by Craig. It's a great opportunity to see much more of his spectacular photography. And he also shares his schedules for his walks and tours at Hudsonville Nature Center. So when you have a chance, pop over and look over his website. I have had the pleasure of knowing Craig Elston, we just discussed, for almost 20 years as the naturalist for the Hudsonville Nature Center. Craig was an instructor for the Master Naturalist program, and he was the only one of the instructors that was with us from the beginning to the end of the program. His creation of the prairie environments section for Master Naturalist was just outstanding. And he also taught spring ephemeral class as well. Craig is the naturalist for the city of Hudsonville. He's the president of the White Pine chapter of the Michigan Botanical Club, and he's the second vice president of the Wildflower Association. If you would like to read Craig's complete and more thorough biography, please look it up in your MMGA newsletter. Craig has just done some just amazing things. And lastly, before I close, I just must comment that Craig is a self-taught naturalist. He inspires me because he has taught himself to do all this. His career, he was a printer. So I just want you to think a little bit as you're listening to him and seeing his amazing photography today, that this is someone that just has figured out how to do this because he adores it. So without further ado, the amazing and wonderful Craig Elston.
Thank you, Jenny. Let's see if we can get the screen to work here again. Okay, you should be seeing the opening slide. I'd like to thank you for having me today, allowing me to share. Always willing to share about especially our native plants. As Jenny mentioned, my website is cdenature.com. I can also be reached at cdenature@gmail.com with any questions or comments. And as she said, it has a schedule of everything we're doing at the Hudsonville Nature Center, as well as some other things that I'm doing. So let's get started with native spring ephemerals. And if you know me, I'm kind of a stickler on definitions sometimes. So we're going to break this down into two questions to begin. First of all, what is a native plant? There's some debate at times, so I'm going to give you the definitions that I use. A native plant is a plant that existed in its indigenous range prior to the arrival of the European. And sometimes we need to keep in mind that the Native Americans plants around, especially those that might have been good for food, that they would try to move someplace else. All natural plant species are native to some place. Our interest is where they native to. This is oxeye daisy, which is not necessarily spring ephemeral, but just an illustration. It is introduced from Europe, but is naturalized throughout much of North America. This ground cover, Allegheny spurge, which is a Pachysandria, is native in the southern US from Kentucky, North Carolina, south to Florida, over to Texas. It does grow here in Michigan. I have it growing. In fact, these pictures are in my garden. It is a good alternative to the Japanese Pachysandria for a ground cover in a landscape. Not native to Michigan, but native to part of North America. You need to be careful sometimes of sources, and I use the USDA database as an illustration here. They used to, on these maps, break out states that were native for a plant, and then where maybe it has moved into other states or become naturalized as separate colors. Now, if it's native to North America, they put native status on whatever state it grows in. So for Michigan, I recommend using the Michigan Flora as a more accurate representation of what's native to Michigan and what part of Michigan. Rebecca Herta, black-eyed Susan, is native to the US and most of Michigan. And the endangered trillium, undulatum, painted trillium, is currently known from only one county in Michigan. According to MNFI, it is found in less than a dozen sites in Sinclair County. You'll notice there are 2 dots on the map. So historically, it was known from 2 counties, but currently it is only found in 1 county in Michigan. So if you're finding this on the west side of the state, it's probably escaped from someone's garden. Second question is, what is a spring ephemeral? Spring ephemerals are the first wildflowers to appear in spring. And we have 2 blooming right now in the Hudsonville-Jenison area. And I will show you both of those as we go. They also may be difficult to spot against the leaf litter. As one that is blooming right now, you can stand and look at it and you may not see it. They usually only flower for a few weeks, as opposed to some of those summer species that go on for several weeks to a couple of months. They need to complete their life cycle for the year before the leaves come on the trees and block the available sunlight. This illustration from In Defense of Plants does a really good job of showing the cycle through the year of spring ephemerals. You notice that on the left, the summer is dormant period. And depending on the species, what part of summer that begins, then through autumn and winter, we begin to get growth. These things are actually growing throughout the winter and as soon as the snow melts and the temperature starts to warm, the soil temperature, you will begin to start seeing plants breaking through the ground. And then we get into spring, where we go through the bloom, set seed, and go back dormant until the next winter, fall. The good part is for master gardeners is many of these can be grown in the garden and make a good addition to the spring garden. And I will mention some of those that are good for the garden as we go. Also, some of the spring ephemerals, such as blood and twin leaf, feature fleshy structures known as eliaciums that attract ants. That's the white appendage you see here on these bloodroot seeds. And the ants eat that. So they take the seeds, they store them, and they just happen to store them at about the right depth for them to germinate and grow. And by removing that appendage, the seeds are allowed to germinate. And it's one of the reasons we get like trilliums, and bloodroot in clumps because the ants have massed the seeds into a stash area. Excuse me. This first spring wildflower that I look for is skunk cabbage, which is blooming right now. Skunk cabbage is a member of the arum family, which consists of 114 genera and 3,750 known species worldwide. There are 8 genera and 14 species of this family native to Michigan. The green leaf spikes, which you can see behind the hood, begin to show in the fall. You go out late fall, you can usually find these poking through in the wet areas. And as winter winds down and spring approaches, the spathe or purple mottled hood, the flower becomes more visible. Skunk cabbage is thermogenic, meaning it produces its own heat. It produces enough heat to melt through snow and ice for 12 to 14 days while it's blooming. This warming also provides a warm area inside the spathe for the pollinating flies after they are drawn in by the pungent odor released by the plant. Physiologically, the warmth is created by flower heads breaking down substances while using a good deal of oxygen. The rootstock and roots store large amounts of starch and are likely to source nutrients for this breakdown. And these roots are very large. Last year, we got the bright idea to dig one up, and we had a pretty big hole by the time we were done. In this particular plant, the internal temperature of the flower spathe was 71 degrees, while the ambient air temperature was 30 degrees. So it gives you an idea how much heat these things can generate. As blooming commences, the hood opens on the side to allow flies in to pollinate the flowers. The roundish flower head has a spongy consistency, like the spathe itself. It consists of numerous small, tightly packed individual flowers that have no petals. As the days get noticeably warmer, by the end of April and May, the bud rapidly unfolds the bright green leaves. The leaves are oblong in shape and have a long stalk. The thick leaf stalks and leaf give off a strong, distinct skunk odor when crushed. And if you come on any of my walks at the nature center, when these leaves are out, you will get to smell one. Leaves are visible well into the summer, but by fall, when the fruit is ripe, the leaves are nowhere to be found. You have to know where they're at to go out looking for the fruit, because you will not see any indication other than this little black ball laid on the ground. Another early bloomer that has been blooming for about a week and a half now here in West Michigan is harbinger of spring, which is found in deciduous woodlands. It usually begins blooming mid-March and can bloom through May. In the Grand Rapids Flora, published in 1901, Emma Call wrote, "Our earliest spring flower, it appears even before the snow has left the shady nooks." And up until probably the last day or so, there has been snow in some of the shady areas here, but the flower has been blooming. The dime laying on the ground next to this plant gives a sense of scale as to how small these flowers are. And when the leaves are dry, they will blend right in. Harbinger of spring is a member of the parsley family and is the easiest to identify from this group. One reason it's so easy to identify is it's the only one blooming this early. The compound leaves are 1 to 3 times divided, with leaf segments linear to oblong. Leaves are few and inconspicuous when blooming begins, but become more plentiful and visible. So by May, this plant could be 8 to 10 inches tall. Not far behind harbinger of spring are the hepaticas, or liver leaf. The name is similar to liver disease hepatitis. Heper means liver, for which the plant was once thought to be a cure for liver diseases. The liver tonic boom in 1883 resulted in 450,000 pounds of dried plant material from hepaticas. Hepatica are members of the buttercup family, and we'll have several of those that are spring ephemerals. The low hairy plants rise to only about 6 inches in height. It is thought that the hairs in the plant help to keep the plants from freezing by trapping warm air. Michigan, we have 2 species of hepatica. We have the sharp-lobed hepatica that is almost entirely restricted to beech maple forest. And then we have round-lobed hepatica, which can also be found in the same beech maple forest, but more often on drier sites with aspen, oak, hickory, pine, even spruce and cedar. The pointed versus rounded leaf ends make it easy to distinguish the 2 species. The new leaves of both species appear after the flowers in the spring, and then they persist through the following spring, becoming mottled or purple in color. The solitary flowers have no petals, but rather 6 to 7 petal-like sepals. Colors range from blue, lavender, purple, pink, white, and many shades in between. They close in cloudy weather and at night. They used to say that these color variations had to do with minerals in the soil, but I would question that, seeing how as you can stand in front of a patch and see several colors right close together. Another early bloomer, which is actually showing buds, haven't seen it bloom yet, but it is budded, is Claytonia virginica, spring beauty. Often of upland beech maple and oak forest and thickets. The genus Claytonia is named for an early American botanist, John Clayton, who lived from 1693 to 1773 in Virginia. A single pair of opposite, fleshy, long, and narrow leaves on each flowering stalk rises from a round-seeded tuber, which is edible and has a nut-like flavor. The only problem is they're very small, so by the time you get enough to eat, you probably are going to be really hungry from all your work. Pink veins and 5 petals. They last several days, open in, face, and follow the sun, but closed when picked or hidden from the sun. Flavanol compounds produce white pigments and also help defend the plants against herbivory and pathogens. Reproduction is directly linked to pollinator preference. Solitary bees do in fact prefer crimson color pigments. The flavonoids that produce white pigmentation also beef up the plant's defenses, causing white-colored flowers to experience significantly less predation than the crimson flowers. While not a spring ephemeral, Durca palustris, or leatherwood, is an early blooming shrub of deciduous forest. It blooms in April in Michigan with curious yellow flowers with strongly exerted stamens. The tough, pliable bark is the source for the common name, leatherwood. The leaves resemble the aromatic leaves of spicebush. Excuse me. The early blooming member of the poppy family is always a treat. Sanguinaria canadensis, or bloodroot, blooms with its white flowers that only open in the sunshine. If it stays cold or cloudy, the petals may fall off without the flower ever opening. The leaves are often curled around the stem at the time of flowering. This is thought to help keep some warmth around the stem. The flowers are quite striking when fully opened. Bloodroot spreads by root and seed to form large colonies, as many as 30 to 60 blooms per clump. The leaves are roundish, palmately lobed or wavy margined and toothed with one deep sinus reaching to the stem. The veins on the underside are prominent orange-red. Red root and Indian paint are other names for bloodroot, referring to the red juice in the roots and the orange juice in the stems. The alkaloid sanguinarian shows antiseptic, anesthetic, and anti-cancer activity. But remember that this plant is poisonous. And this is also a very good one in the garden. Is it basically you plant it in the right spot, you never have to do anything to it again, and it will just keep multiplying. Another member of the buttercup family, falls through anemone, has alternate leaves that are 2 to 3 times compound with roundish leaflets and are 2 to 3 lobed. False through is found in rich woods and thickets. The clump forming plant can cover areas of a couple of square feet. The flowers have no petals, but rather 5 white sepals and are solitary from the axis or the terminal. And if you go on my spring walks, just be aware that I'm going to ask you what color the petals are of this flower. And people that know me are starting to think now, like if you're asking, there's probably some trick here because they're really not petals. The plants are gone dormant by early to midsummer, and many plants leaf out in the fall, overwintering and ready to bloom in the early spring. As a result, a few will bloom in the fall or winter if the weather is warm enough. I've seen it bloom in November, December, and January. This photo was taken in December 2015. A similar looking member of the buttercup family is just rue anemone. Like false rue anemone, this flower is lacking petals, but has 5 to 10 petal-like sepals that can be white or white tinged with pink. Also notice the leaves difference here. The leaves are barely 3-lobed and not toothed, as in false rue. They also whirl around the stem. Plants are more solitary, not forming large colonies. It is, excuse me. It is found in rich or sometimes dry deciduous forest. It prefers sandy, humusy soils in parched shade. Dutchman's breeches, another member of the poppy family, is found in rich woods. It will often be very widespread, forming huge colonies, but by early summer is all but gone from the forest floor with only the fruiting stems barely visible. The leaves are fern-like in appearance. They are very finely dissected with divisions of 3 and are pale beneath. The fragrant flowers are nodding in a row on the flowering stem, white tipped with yellow or cream, with 2 conspicuous divergent spurs and 4 petals in 2 pairs, and usually begins to bloom in April. Another similar and closely related flower is squirrel corn, found in the same conditions, and the 2 may grow side by side. The white heart-shaped flowers are rounded instead of spurred and bloom a bit later than Dutchman's breeches. The flowers resemble white bleeding heart. Notice the similarity of the foliage to the Dutchman's breeches, making it difficult, if not impossible, to positively identify either by the leaves alone. Another sure way to distinguish the 2 species is the bulbs. The pinkish bulbs are Dutchman's breeches, and the yellow corn-looking bulbs are squirrel corn. Both can become exposed on eroded hillsides. I saw this one up in my garden 2 days ago, just coming up. This is cut-leaf toothwort or pepper root. It's a member of the mustard family. 2 or 3 leaves in a whorl or slightly separated on the stem. The leaves are 3 foliate with leaflets simple to deeply 5 to 9 cleft. Another one is found in rich moist woods, especially beech maple, and can be added as an early treat to the garden. White or purplish flowers from late March to April and into early May with a late spring. Cardamine diphylla, 2-leaved toothwort or pepperroot or crinkleroot, is another member of the mustard family with similar white flowers in April and May. They have 2 nearly opposite leaves above the middle of the stem with 3 foliate leaflets. They are coarsely toothed and bluntly rounded or lobed. It is found in rich woods, usually in lower ground than cutleaf toothwort. The rootstock is crisp and edible with a mustard flavor. Generally, this grows in very large masses, and if you were to try to walk where it is growing, you're probably going to sink in the very wet ground. Here are the 2 growing side by side, showing the leaves and the roots. On the left is cutleaf toothwort. On the right is the 2-leaf toothwort. And I actually did some of these photos last year with COVID. When everything got shut down, I suddenly was not able to do tours. So I turned to making videos and wanted to show as much as we could in those videos. Marsh marigold, cowslip, buttercup, or one of at least 2 dozen other accepted common names. Another member of the buttercup family whose flowers have no petals. Instead, there are 5 to 10 bright yellow petal-like sepals in loose flat clusters. Blooms mostly above the leaves in late April through May and occasionally into June. The genus is Latin for yellow flowered plant, and the species name is Latin for swampy or marshy. This will grow in the same wet situations as skunk cabbage, and another one that you probably don't want to walk through. The leaves are nearly kidney-shaped or rounded and toothed with a deep sinus. The leaves and stems are edible when cooked if changing the water 3 or 4 times, but are poisonous raw. The erect plant can reach 2 feet in height, forming rounded mounds, often in great profusion. Marsh marigold is found in wet places and often in the same places as skunk cabbage. It can be used in a moist area or a water garden. I have in the past grown this in water gardens where you put it in a pot that actually the surface is above the water, not completely in the water. It'll do just fine. And on occasion, the plants get confused and bloom outside their normal season. This was in November 2019. Blue cohosh, blueberry root or papoose root, is found in the rich deciduous forest. The inconspicuous greenish yellow flowers are in a loose terminal cluster. Each flower has 6 greenish, bronze, or purple or yellowish petals, much smaller than the sepals. Blooms April to early May. There is another species called giant blue cohosh that blooms a little earlier with purple flowers. And I have a lead on where that's at. We'll be checking that out in a few weeks. There are the large sepals, which when we first look at this plant, we think they're the petals, but those are sepals. And right around the center, you see the small petals. The fruit is a blue pea-like drupe resembling blueberries, but are slightly toxic to humans, so I would not eat them. The fruit often remains on all winter and is visible above the snow, adding winter interest to the woodland or the garden. When we do winter botany walks in January, this is one that's usually sticking up over the snow unless we have 2 or 3 feet on the ground. Wild leek or ramps have the spring ephemeral thing reversed. The flat, fleshy, long, light green, onion-smelling leaves appear in March to May and are gone by flowering time in July. They form large patches in rich deciduous forest and are the first notable green in the spring woods. And these patches are large enough you can see them driving down the road. Notice the stem below the leaves is usually a red color, which helps to distinguish non-flowering plants from lily of the valley. And this is important to distinguish the two if you're out foraging to eat, because leek is edible, but lily of the valley is poisonous. The leaves rise from long ovid white bulbs with a strong onion flavor. Both the leaves and the bulbs, as I said, are edible. Leeks have become highly sought after by foragers and are disappearing from some woods from over-harvesting. It can take up to 3 years for the seed to germinate and another 5 to 7 years to produce a sizable bulb. So you're looking at up to 10 years to get a harvestable plant, and people just come in and dig them up by masses. So it takes a long time to recover. Native Americans used food both dried and raw. Cherokees ate the leaves for colds. By mid-July, small white flowers are borne on stout pedicels in a round terminal umbel on the dark forest floor. This is a bloom such that I've only seen once in my life. This was last summer in Hudsonville. Usually we see some blooming, but never in this profusion. The flowers have 3 sepals and petals. Spice bush blooms in April with small honey yellow flowers in rich damp woods. The leaves have a lemony scent when bruised. We are seeing this growing a little bit on hillsides and sometimes upland, but most of the time, if you can find skunk cabbage or cowslip marsh marigold, that's a good place to look for spice bush. The berries ripen in late summer and are highest protein berry for birds. The fruit and bark have many folk medicine uses. A member of the lily family, yellow adder's tongue, fawn lily, dog's tooth violet, trout lily, can be found in rich deciduous forest and moist thickets, oftentimes in large colonies of leaves from non-flowering plants. Mature plants have 2 opposite, fleshy, usually mottled leaves. If you look right in the foreground, you will see some mottling on those leaves. The flowers are like yellow, or lily-like, yellow, solitary, and nodding, with yellow or rich reddish-brown anthers. The reddish anthers lend to the name adder's tongue. According to the late Fred Case, the plant sends out runners and pulls down each year. If they get too deep, they will not bloom but produce only leaves, because all the energy is going sending that leaf up. Another species, white dog's tooth violet, trout lily, fawn lily, is found in the same rich woods, thickets, bottomlands, and meadows as the yellow. The 2 species may even grow side by side. The flowers are lily-like, pinkish or bluish white, solitary, and nodding. Jeffersonia diphylla, twin leaf, is listed as special concern in Michigan. It's found in rich deciduous forest, especially in floodplains and well-drained slopes above the floodplains. I've noticed here in Hudsonville that it's usually on the high side of the high water mark. The leaves are all basal, divided in 2 half-ovate leaflets like outspread butterfly wings, and become taller after flowering. The species name diphylla means 2-leaved. The genus name honors the 3rd president and botanical patron Thomas Jefferson. In a May 1792 meeting of the American Philosophical Society, Benjamin Smith Barton assigned the wildflower twinleaf to a new genus, Jeffersonia, to honor Jefferson's knowledge of natural history, especially in botany and zoology. The information of this gentleman is equaled by that of few persons in the United States, Barton said. Twin leaf has white solitary terminal flower with 8 oblong flat petals. It blooms in late April in Michigan, but in Virginia blooms on or around Jefferson's birthday, which is April 13th. The flowers last for only a short time of a few hours in warm weather to 1 or 2 days in normal cooler weather. I believe in my garden here in Michigan, I've seen this bloom once, early enough to be on Jefferson's birthday. The dainty early meadowrue is typically found in rich deciduous forest, often on hillsides. Blooming in early May, its beauty is in its soft, delicate appearance. The dainty 2 to 3 times 3-parted leaves with rounded teeth or lobed leaflets are often mistaken for columbine at a glance, but they are much smaller and more delicate. The plants are dioecious, having either male or female flowers that are greenish or straw colored, very small and inconspicuous. The panicles of the male flowers are attractive and graceful, and these are only about 1/8 of an inch at best in length, so they're very small. The female flower is very small and really inconspicuous. You almost need a loop to see this one blooming on the female plant. False mermaid. Soon after the snow is gone from the woods, you will begin seeing this annual spring wildflower in rich deciduous forest, especially in moist areas such as floodplains. All the rest of these early spring flowers are perennials. This is the only annual that we find in the woods in the spring. This weak, inconspicuous light green plant will carpet the forest floor by mid-April. And most of the, especially finer, lighter yellowish green that you see in this picture is all false mermaid. The leaves are very deeply pinnately lobed. When eaten, the plant has a peppery taste. Very good to eat. The small flowers are 3-part with 3 sepals blooming larger than the 3 tiny white petals. And again, this is to see the flowers, you need a loop almost on this, it's so small. The Sarum canadensis, wild ginger, also known as Canada snakeroot and Indian ginger in Vermont. Our native ginger grows as a low creeping thick rootstock on or just below the surface. It is spicy and aromatic when crushed. The flowers are solitary on short peduncles from the leaf axis, hidden under the leaf. There are no petals, but the calyx is bell-shaped with 3 spreading pointed lobes. Blooming from April to early June in rich, moist, deciduous forest. This plant has been listed as edible. It has a very mild ginger flavor, but newer research is showing that it could cause renal failure and lead to kidney cancer, but nobody really knows what volume you would need to eat to have those side effects. Paired kidney heart-shaped leaves are finely hairy beneath. The plant forms large colonies, making for a good ground cover in moist, shady sites. Just do not plant it in a place that's going to be dry sand all summer because it will not survive. The Ojibwa name comes from the leaf resembling the cross-section stake of a sturgeon. The endangered Hortensia virginica, Virginia bluebells, or cowslip, forms large colonies in rich forest or floodplain forest. A beloved plant for the garden, One plant will spread into many for a breathtaking show before vanishing until the next spring. This is really more of a true spring ephemeral that blooms a little bit later, comes up, blooms, sets seeds, and then disappears for the rest of the summer. The pink buds open to the lovely blue trumpet-shaped flowers. Thomas Jefferson noted this species blooming near his home as one of the earliest entries in his garden book when he was 21 years old. Geranium maculatum, wild geranium, also known as stork's bill and old maid's nightcap, is a common wildflower of rich deciduous forest, especially in moist sites such as stream sides and semi-open moist areas. The root is rich in tannin, with the concentration being the greatest just before flowering. Helen Smith wrote, "This is one of the most satisfactory wildflowers for the garden. It flowers freely and is attractive even when not in bloom." The flowers with 5 rows, purple, pink, bluish, or occasionally white petals bloom May into June. The leaves are 3 to 5 pinnately cut, basal, and often large, and leave a nice texture in the garden after flowering has commenced. The capsule is elongated, pointed with 5 divisions, spreading at the base at maturity, arching up and out to throw the single seed. And this is the result of that is those massive areas of bloom that we saw a couple slides ago. The Latin name means crane, referring to the seed capsule, which resembles the bill of a crane. Crane's bill is also another name for a geranium. And I would be remiss if I did not include everyone's favorite spring wildflower, Trillium grandiflorum, or great white trillium. It can be found in rich woods and thickets, especially ravines, in late April and May. It can take up to 5 years for trillium seeds to germinate, and another 5 years or more to bloom. Since the flower is so close to the leaves, picking them weakens the plant, since the leaves are now producing food for next year's plant. Tri, the first 3 letters of trillium, means 3. Trilliums have a single whorl of 3 leaves that are pointed at the ends with prominent veins. The flowers are solitary with 3 white petals and 3 sepals. The petals fade to pink or rose as the flower begins to fade from blooming. Oftentimes I'll have people ask me in the nature center, where are all the white trilliums? All we see is pink. Well, they were white, but as they start to fade, they turn to pink. Except this pink flowered trillium is from a woods in Mackinac County in the UP, where after very cold winters, the flowers tend to open pink. Michigan has 8 native species of trillium, and here are a couple of the rare ones that are a great addition to the woodland garden and are often available in the nursery trade. This is the threatened Trillium recurvatum, prairie trillium, and also the threatened Trillium sisal, or toadshade. Both of these species are native to southwest Michigan and can be seen at Warren Woods near Three Oaks or at the M&A Trillium Ravines Preserve near Niles, which host 4 species of trillium. And maybe you've noticed a pattern about spring ephemerals. Most are found in rich deciduous woods. I would encourage you to get out, enjoy the spring ephemeral jewels as the season is upon us. They will be coming quickly with the weather forecast that we are looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. That was wonderful. We do have a couple of questions. Jenny answered one, but I think other people might be interested. They wanted to know, will deer eat these plants?
Deer love them. Um, 30 some years ago, when I started doing walks with Hoffmaster at what we called the Trillium Festival back then, the hillsides were white with trilliums in May. Then we went through a time where you couldn't hardly find a trillium in Hoffmaster because the deer were so plentiful. They probably rank right up there ahead of hostas for deer.
And then we have another question. Do you have suggestions for a source for these spring ephemerals and shrubs? Leatherwood, for example.
I know that Bill Snyder is working with Leatherwood. I don't know that he has it for sale yet. That's the only one I know of in Michigan that's actually doing anything with it.
And how could they contact him?
His nursery is Wild Type. You can find him online.
Whoops. And I think that's all the questions. Does anyone else have any questions quick before we end? Not seeing any. Want to thank Craig for this wonderful presentation. And remind people that Craig will be joining us again Saturday, March 27th with his Botanical Quest documenting Michigan's rare native flora through photography, which is a wonderful presentation. And then I hope you all can join us Tuesday again on March 23rd when we will have Melanie Mannion talking about native trees and shrubs and current issues with diseases and pests. And if, oh gosh, now we have questions coming in. Hold on.
Now you got questions.
Okay. I'm interested in Pachysandra. Where is it available?
I gotta think a minute. I got it out of Tennessee or Kentucky. And the name of the nursery slips me right now. If someone wants to email me, I can probably tell them that.
Okay. And that was from Marty, so I'm sure she'll be getting a hold of you. When is a good time to transplant?
If you do it properly, probably anytime. It's easiest when they're growing in the spring because you can see them. Later, all you have is roots, and you have to be able to identify the root. I have moved a lot of spring ephemerals in the spring, and as long as you water them good, they do quite well.
And then we have a question from Lillian. She wants to know what you would suggest to crowd out Botania. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, Lillian, in wetland areas.
Having a hard time picturing what that is.
It's Houtaynia. Houtaynia.
Oh, okay. It's starting to come. Well, I'm really not sure any of these would do that because they're not going to compete well with anything that's aggressive. Probably you're going to have to go to a herbicide, although that may not be what you want to do. But if anything is getting too aggressive, unfortunately, that's the best way to get rid of.
Okay, and then we have a question, will the recordings be available to rewatch? Carol, yes, they will be. We are working, we saved them all in the cloud, and we are working on a page on our Squarespace website that will house all the information of how you can view these again. It will have links that have been mentioned in all our presentations and some of the slides that have been used. Mary would like to know, can you recommend plants for dry shade under maples? Well, that's a good one, Mary.
Well, most of these grow under maples in the forest. The biggest thing is getting through the roots to plant them. Trying to think, trilliums would be all right. Most of them, they like it moist. They will grow where it's dry. Probably the Dutchman's breeches, some of those type of things would do well.
Okay, and that seems to be it for our questions. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. I hope you have a chance to get out this weekend and walk around in your yard and see what's coming up. I know I have some spring things headed up in my gardens that I'm excited to see them bloom. So have a great weekend, and we will see you all again Tuesday night. Thank you very much. Vicki, you may end the webinar. Thank you, Craig. That was wonderful.
Thank you.